I am very pleased to present the first in a series of presentations on the history of the Plummer family from its history in the United States following emancipation. This first presentation provides results of ancestral research for descendants of Caesar Plummer, with particular emphasis on the branch of the family from his son, William Dan Plummer, down through the offspring of Kathy Plummer Hill. In addition, there will be reflections on family from the perspective of worship, community service, and fellowship. So what does family mean? Well, for me, family means love, caring, and sharing. I base that on God's proclamation in Genesis, the 2nd chapter and the 18th verse. It reads, "And the Lord God said, It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him an helpmeet for him." So God made the proclamation, starting with the nucleus of a family, that we need each other. God created families to love, to take care of each other, and share with each other. God gave us a family because He never wants us to be alone. Recorded history of the Plummer family in the United States begins after the proclamation of emancipation. At that time, there are 4 individuals who were documented as being resident in the United States, 3 men and 1 woman. The 3 men, Caesar Plummer, born in 1855, Joe Plummer, born in 1858, and Doc Plummer, born in 1860. Also, Finlay Plummer is documented in the 1880 census as living with a son, Doc Plummer, as well as a granddaughter, Maddie. Although there has been a belief within the Plummer family that Caesar Plummer and Doc Plummer were brothers, there is no documentation that could be found to support this. Also, Joe Plummer was documented in the early census as having been born in 1858, indicating that he also would have been alive during emancipation. There is documented evidence showing that the 3 individuals, Caesar Plummer, Doc Plummer, and Joe Plummer, lived in close proximity to each other. I could find in census records and property records that Caesar Plummer and Joe Plummer lived close beside each other until about 1900, and after that I couldn't find any further records on Joe Plummer. Likewise, because there were no birth records being maintained during those times, I could not find any birth or death records that would say that Friendly Plummer was also the mother of Caesar and Joe, but I did find records that said that Friendly Plummer was the mother of Doc Plummer. And so for my family line, Caesar Plummer had a son, William Plummer, who was called Dan, and Dan Plummer was born in 1880. There are legal records that also showed the activities of the Plummer family at the turn of the century. Voter registration records show that Caesar Plummer was registered to vote in 1867. Property records showed that Caesar Plummer, Joe Plummer, and Dan Plummer owned property that ranged from $112 to $560 for the ownership of horses, mules, and livestock,
household furnishings, machinery, and tools. Members of the family also served in the military. Arthur Plummer, Fred, Cordy, and J.C. Plummer were drafted into the military. J.C. Plummer received a medal in the World War I. The 1910 census records show Caesar Plummer, age 54, as head of household. Included is his wife of 8 years, Missouri Plummer, age 45. The census records show 15 children living in this household. This does not include 2 older sons, Cordy Lee Plummer and William or Dan Plummer. This also does not include 2 daughters, Trudy and Letha. One explanation for the large number of children could be the fact that Joe Plummer is not found in census records after 1900. This could lead one to believe that 4 of his children are shown as living with Caesar Plummer. The 4 children are Clarence, Fred, who is also known as Grover, Arthur, who is shown on this record as Bortha, and Ophelia, who is shown as Babe. Also shown on this record is a son, Ralph, who is shown on the record as not. Ralph died at a young age. In moving further along the family tree of Caesar Plummer, I'll share reflections of the branch of the tree that springs from William, also known as Dan Plummer. Dan Plummer married Harriet Hightower, and from their children was my grandfather Willis Plummer, whose youngest son Paul Plummer is my father. Dan Plummer married Harriet Hightower on January 26, 1902. The Dan Plummer branch of the Plummer family tree includes sons Cordy Lee, Horace, Ben, Wayman, Ernest, Ardell, Charlie, Johnny, Georgia, and Willis. Only one daughter was born into this family, Elizabeth Plummer. Ultimately, Elizabeth Hendricks. My grandfather, Willis Plummer, was one of the youngest sons of Dan and Harriet Hightower. Willis Plummer was affectionately known as Son Plummer, and for me, he was known as Pa. Willis Plummer and Rosa Haynes were united in marriage, and they were the parents of 3 children, William Marion, Ethel, their only daughter, and my father, Paul Mack Plummer. Paul Plummer married Glenda McCrae, and their marriage led to 5 children, Dwight, Charles, myself, Paul Jr., and Regina. I'm married to Mitchell Hill, and we have 2 children, Mitchell Matthew Hill Jr. and Candace Hill.
Worship is very much focused on service. I watched my grandmother and my grandfather serve in the church as ushers, choir members, serve in mission societies, as well as my grandfather serving as a trustee and a steward of the church. But I didn't understand those leadership roles. What I knew is that anytime I saw my grandparents in church, they were working. I don't have a lot of memories of them just sitting and enjoying worship services. I recall my grandmother having me and my cousin Brenda in particular taking us to many country churches when we were little girls, and she couldn't drive, so of course that means my grandfather was driving. And we called my grandfather, whose name is W.J. Plummer. In some of the census records, he's listed as Sonny Plummer. Many of our relatives and people in the community knew him as Son Plummer, but we called him Pa. And so I remember Pa driving us to churches all throughout primarily Lawrence County, to Mission Society meetings that my grandmother would attend, and she would have me and my cousin Brenda go, and we would go and we would read a poem or have a reading or whatever it is that grandmama had told us we needed to do. The other memory that's kind of instilled upon me as it relates to my grandparents being involved in preparing us for service is my grandfather's efforts to prepare me to play the piano for New Bethel and for the church. Starting at a very young age, my grandfather bartered in some way that I don't really know the details of for me to receive free piano lessons.
And so, as descendants of Son Plummer and Rosa Haynes Plummer, we all try to follow their model of service, love, caring for each other, and sharing with each other. One of the things that we've always enjoyed is the opportunity to fellowship with family. We always looked forward to big meeting celebrations the first Sunday in September. It was a time when we could count on seeing relatives from everywhere, north and south, a time when we could look forward to delicious food served on the church grounds, and a time when we could simply have fun with family. We're so thankful that we had an opportunity in 2022 to again come together for big meeting. Although it's been many years since we were together as family, we look forward to the next family reunion when we can again join together with family for food, fellowship, and sharing our faith.